Good afternoon, everyone, and a big welcome to the fourth in this series of webinars for the transport industry, put on by Workwell Victoria, part of WorkSafe. We've been through three already, which has been around creating a mentally healthy workplace for all employees. We've talked about how we can manage the risk of fatigue and also the risk of trauma. And today we're talking about how we manage and improve the mental health of our contractors. And I found out that this is a really significant element in the transport industry, particularly for truck drivers. And someone from a transport group told me yesterday that 93% of truck drivers are actually self-employed. So this is very relevant to everyone in trucking and perhaps also in buses as well. I'm delighted to welcome both Meryl Stibbett and Alicia Crabtree from WorkSafe with us today, and they'll be available to answer any questions at the end of this webinar. Last week, we had lots of questions which went beyond the half-hour, 30-minute timeline. We'll finish the webinar by 30 minutes, but we will carry on to answer as many questions as you have. So thanks again, and we'll get underway. So yeah, as I mentioned, the contractor is of course a really important area for many in the transport area across Victoria. And I think that, in light of recent developments in Victoria, we've had a second lockdown. What we're talking about today is incredibly important. And I want to share something a little bit later on. I was speaking yesterday to Ruth Oakton, who's the group manager for engagement and wellbeing for Toll. And she shared something which I think is very interesting to reflect on, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. So we're really highlighting the resources available through this Workwell toolkit, and we're going to be talking about the why and the what, but then we're going to be really focusing on the how, and we'll be working through the Workwell toolkit. We'll share at the end about how you find that, but you can just Google Workwell Toolkit login and you'll find a place how you can get there. Now, we have some people here today that have been to all four webinars, and some it's their first. It's interesting, we started off, I think, with about 70 people registered with our first webinar, and there's now 166 today. So it's great that the news has spread and more people have decided to be involved. What we're going to be covering is why mental health workplace is important. And for those that have been on previous webinars, please give us a little bit of latitude here. We're then going to be talking about what we can do to promote contractor mental health, what are some of the work-related factors, and what are some of the resources, importantly, what are the resources that are available through this free Workwell toolkit. And we'll also be sharing some resources that are available also through Are You OK? So for those of you that haven't been here before, my name's Graham Cowan, and I guess why I'm so passionate about mentally healthy workplaces is that about 10 years ago, I went through an incredibly difficult period of depression, and I ended up losing my job, being out of work for 5 years, and then I gradually came back by writing a series of books, and Back from the Brink range. And through those books, I also became involved with Gavin Larkin, the founder of Are You OK? And helped launch that, and I remain a board director of Are You OK? So when you think about mental health, I really like to, that's the outcome we're all looking for, but I really believe that we need to practice self-care, which leads to resilience, which leads to growth. And if we get that right, that leads to team care, team resilience, and team growth. So I mentioned before about Ruth Oakton from Toll, and she actually does a series each week called Walk and Talk. And essentially, she does it over lunchtime, she does the talking, and anyone from Toll can listen in to this broadcast. And the idea is they walk and hear what's going on. And something that Ruth said to me yesterday, she said that her first one this time after the second lockdown is what worked last time, to really remind people that we have been a long way and we can reflect on what has helped us most in the previous lockdown. So I'm just going to launch a poll now and ask you to vote on what are up to 3 things that have really helped you up to now. So you'll see those options on your screen in front of you. And if you just nominate the top 3 for you out of those, which really helped you. That's great. Excellent. We've got a number of people, up to 38%, 42% of people voted. We'll keep going for another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll end the polling. And what's really interesting about this, and I'm sure you'll agree, is the multitude of strategies. It clearly hasn't been one thing that made a big difference, but if we had to name one winner, it is exercise. And if anyone knows the research from the Mayo Clinic about exercise, they said just a 30-minute walk improves our mood up to 12 hours later. So it's great that people have discovered that. But also there's a number of other ones that are above 50%. Structuring my workday and having a start and finish time, 50% agree with that. And having me time, whether that's for a hobby or meditation or something like that, is fantastic. And so they're the top 3: regular exercise, structuring my day, and having me time. So I think as we go ahead, we have to remind ourselves of that and make sure that we double down on those strategies that are good for us. We're now going to be talking about how we create the right environment to prevent mental health issues starting in the first place. And it's worth remembering that 45% of Australians will experience mental health condition in their lifetime. And for those that may be like me, that have had several episodes, we will always have a predisposition. And it's really up to us to take ownership of our own mood, our own activities, to keep ourselves as best we can in the right mood and the right positive effect. But from a business point of view, there's also some pretty compelling research. This is research put together by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which showed that for every $1 you invest in improving mental health proactively, you get a $2.30 return on that. And for transport, it's actually higher. You get a $2.80 return. It's good for business, positive mood. People that are in a positive mood have been shown to be 31% more productive, 37% more influential, and 300% more creative, according to Harvard Business Review research. So there's very, very, good business reasons apart from social and humanity reasons to promote a mentally healthy workplace. 1 in 5 will experience a mental health condition in any 1 year. And I've also been told that if we include addiction, substance abuse issues, and it would actually be 1 in 4. So if you work in a team of 12, there's 3 of you that could be struggling with a mental health issue or a substance abuse problem. It's very, very costly. Every mental health stress claim, as you can see there, $86,000 per year, the 4th highest for WorkSafe Victoria. And it's really important about, preventing it, but if someone is off on injury, the quicker we can get them back to work and connected with their workmates, the better. Because if they're away for 6 months, only 54% will return to work. If it's 2 years, 38% have not returned to work. So I think the thing that we all need to really think about is that prevention and early detection is the closest thing to a silver bullet in having a mentally healthy workplace with strong productivity as well as well-being. And it's also worth keeping in mind, and this study came out by the CSIRO pre this COVID crisis, and they nominated rising work stress and mental health issues as one of the top 6 megatrends for the next 20 years. And that was prior to COVID-19. And there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to show that mental health issues have increased, by volumes of calls to Lifeline and Beyond Blue, etc. So it is really, really incredible. This is a clear and present danger for managers, leaders, business owners. But here's the thing, in research done by Allianz Australia and released last year, they found that 91% of employees were dissatisfied in how employers were responding to mental health issues. And it's worth keeping in mind, and this is Beyond Blue research, 91% of Australians desire a mentally healthy workplace. So it's, if we want to compete in the new economy, we want to be flexible, really thinking about how we can help each other, how we can build a sense of cohesion, build inclusion, build a commitment to better solve problems. These are all things that contribute to a mentally healthy workplace. It's got a short video here which talks about the factors that impact on mental health in the workplace. Oops, we'll just go back. It's only about a 1-minute video.
But what is a mentally healthy workplace? Firstly, it's one which has measures in place to prevent harm by identifying risks to mental health. It manages harm from an early stage and supports team members' recovery along the way. So if a person's mental health is connected to their work, how are your workplace systems and practices affecting your team? There are a number of work-related factors which can be controlled and managed by employers to create a mentally healthy workplace and to prevent mental injuries. Work-related factors that are not controlled and managed can increase stress. This can lead to physical injury, mental injury, or even both at the same time. Of course, workers can be exposed to more than one work-related factor at a time. Some may always be present, while others occur occasionally. Common work-related factors that can become hazards if not managed are low job control, high and low job demands, poor support, poor organisational change management, poor organisational justice, low recognition and reward, low role clarity, poor workplace relationships, poor environmental conditions, remote and isolated work, and violent or traumatic events.
So as you can see from that, there's several areas that can contribute to or cause mental health problems in an organisation, and trying to cover them all isn't very productive. And as we work through the how of improving mental health for contractors, I really think there's real power in focusing on one or two, really deciding with your team, with your contractors about what could help the most is really helpful. And many of those factors that we shared previously really reflect on the engagement and the enablement, how willing and able people were to support each other. But I think, one of the things we can all keep in mind is the importance of creating a culture of care. And the Gallup organisation has been researching employee engagement for over 50 years. And they found that this one statement, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person, they found that this question was the best predictor of discretionary effort or engagement. And the more people that strongly agree with this in an organisation, the higher the profit, productivity, customer service levels, and employee longevity. And they also showed, but I couldn't have room on this screen, that it also showed where that existed, there were much less incidents of accidents or time off work and absenteeism. So we need to really consider about creating this culture of care, which brings us to the Workwell Toolkit. And as I've explained before, for those of you who've been before, you know the background, but if you Google Workwell Toolkit login, if you haven't tried this before, you can log in and we'll show you about some of these things you can access. It allows you to put in what industry you're in, the size of your organization, and what are the particular areas that you think are particularly need to focus on in your own organisation, and then provides feedback along the way. I'll just play now a very brief video for those of you that have not seen this about to provide a bit of an overview of how this all works.
Meet WorkSafe's Workwell Toolkit, a tailored free online resource helping employers to create mentally healthy workplaces. Sign up and explore your custom dashboard with case studies, videos, and other useful resources that you can begin to action straight away with your team. Use a step-by-step approach and track each action. Then share the progress with your colleagues. The topics include role clarity, leadership, change management, and so many more. Creating a safe and mentally healthy workplace is good for your employees and your business. Discover the Workwell Toolkit today.
That's, as you can see, that there's, a wealth of information there, and we'll be going into this in a bit more detail, but don't think you have to get through everything. The most important thing is to really focus on, just think of the old Pareto principle, the 20% of factors that provide 80% of the result. Think about that in your own organisation. We also want to share as well some resources that are available from Are You OK? And you may recall we just talked about the importance of creating a culture of care. Well, nothing creates more a culture of care if workmates look out for each other. If they see someone who's not doing great, they ask, are you okay? This is a short video which explains how to ask, are you okay? It forms the acronym ALEC. And yeah, I'll just put that on now.
Alec and Jenny enjoy a good laugh at work, though Alec's noticed Jenny has been distant and distracted lately. His gut is telling him something's going on. We want Alec to trust his gut, reach out to Jenny and start a conversation. Alec's a bit worried he could say the wrong thing, but he can feel confident if he follows Are You OK? Through the conversation steps. Ask, are you okay? Alec should pick a comfortable, quiet place and the right time to ask Jenny how everything's going. He can mention his concern and the changes he's noticed. Alec should listen instead of trying to immediately fix Jenny's problems. Encourage action. Alec can help Jenny think of steps she can take to manage her situation, such as chatting to friends or family, a GP or other professionals, such as an employee assistance program. Alec should check in a few days later, let Jenny know he's been thinking of her and wants to know how she's been going. If Jenny's not ready to chat to him, he can encourage her to open up to someone she trusts. If you're worried about a workmate, reach out and start a conversation using the 4 steps. Ask, listen, encourage action, and check in. Alec can make a difference, and so can you. Are you okay?
It's a very simple concept, but we have had just thousands of examples where someone has reached out to a work colleague or a loved one and asked that question and encouraged them to seek action. So don't underestimate the the simplicity of it, because it really goes far beyond that. In fact, our theme this year in 2020 is going to be what's beyond asking, are you okay? So what do you do and how do you uncover an issue if someone isn't great? So keep an eye out for those resources. If you ever want to get download any of the resources for your organization, Are You OK? Has a Vimeo channel which allow you to download the videos, or of course you can watch it via Vimeo or YouTube.
Alec and Jenny enjoy a good laugh at work.
So this is manage some contractors and contractors. And, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a really significant number of people in the transport sector. As I heard yesterday, it's actually 93% of truck drivers are subcontractors or contractors. So, but what this toolkit enables you to do is to choose what a topic area that you think is important and then go beyond that. And they follow 5 steps for every one of those subjects which are raised there. Understand the problem, talk with your people, give things a try. Did it work? And check in to see how it can improve. So now we'll just go through some of the things that specifically relate to that in the transport sector. So what I'd like people to do, if you would mind, is in your chat box, When you think about the contractors and subcontractors that you've worked with currently or in the past, what are some of the factors that really help affect their mental health? If you could just type into the chat, that would be fantastic. And Jenny will read it out in a moment. So just type in the things that people that are significant risk factors for, in your experience with subcontractors. And Jenny, I'll get you to nominate what people are writing down.
Sure, quite a few coming through. Summarising them, there's a lot of comments around the lack of job security and financial pressures. Tiredness seems to be a big factor. Uncertainty around who to approach with OH&S issues, difficult processes to follow, delay in payment. So quite a lot of factors there, but really a lot around financial pressures and the lack of security.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. And I think it really highlights, most of these, this 93% are self-employed, and, financial well-being is incredibly important when you're self-employed because you have to feed your family through this process. But you've really nominated what we've found as well, that, Workwell have found that, long hours, lack of job security, contract pressures, financial pressure, all 100% in alignment with all the things you've just nominated. So step one is understanding the problem. And the next step is about understanding your requirements with contractors and subcontractors. And the legislation now tells us that whether they're full-time employees or contractors or subcontractors, there's an equal obligation on the employer to treat them all the same and to really care about their sense of well-being. The next part is really having talks and discussions with your contractors and subcontractors. And in a moment, I'm just going to be sharing a video from Melbourne Water where they, as an employer or the contract hire, work with two large subcontractors to address some issues. So we'll just play that now. And of course, this is a bigger scenario than many of the small and medium-sized businesses that are watching this today. But the same principles apply. It's really being open, asking people to contribute, and being curious.
We're the team from the Melbourne Water Capital Delivery Framework, and we're focused on safety leadership to make us all safer together. So Melbourne Water runs a $500 million a year capital program, which brings together two consortia headed by John Holland in one and CPB in another.
I think the risks are very specific to the Melbourne Water projects in that they're various size projects in different locations. We can have a location in the middle of a very busy intersection through to something that's in a greenfield environment.
Our safety performance was heading in the wrong direction. And so as a client, that was a little bit worrying. But what was more worrying for us was that when we actually looked at both John Holland and CPB as individual businesses, they were running the highest total recordable injury frequency rates, both on our framework. So we, as a client, really needed to look at ourselves as a common denominator in that. So we stopped work for a day. We brought everyone together at Moonee Valley, which was a big forum. The main output from that workshop was a set of behaviours that really drove improvement with the number of subcontractors that were operating around our sites.
So even though we competed against it commercially, everybody just left all their egos behind, sat down and genuinely said, how do we make this better?
Now, look, it is definitely unique for two contractors to be sitting in the same room with the client talking about safety, particularly around how we manage our critical risks.
So the stats have come down. They've come down considerably. We have seen a decline in the severity of our incidents. So whilst we may see some recordable incidents, they're generally less significant than they were 2 or 3 years ago.
we all focus on safety, but what Melbourne Water have done in getting the contractors together has been very, very unique and very positive.
There's a great example where even competitors work together for the goal of improving safety, and who couldn't argue with that? And I think one of the big things that I think came through there is leaving egos at the door. And I think that particularly applies for managers and business owners to really try to be curious, try to, when people make suggestions, try and ask for more examples, more clarification, saying, tell me more. So the next part is to make a plan. You know, you heard that Melbourne Water and the subcontractors made a plan, and in the case of you know, the transport industry, and what you already highlighted in our previous chat commentary was that, you know, well-being, financial well-being and budgeting is quite an issue in the transport industry. And if you go through the Workwell website covering these contractors and subcontractors, you'll see there's a website there called Money Smart about budgeting and putting things in place that maybe we're sharing with some of your subcontractors and contractors. And finally, you know, review the strategies and see how it goes. At the end of the day, it's incredibly important to set a time once you've decided on what you're going to focus on, and then to review it, you know, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, whatever, or maybe even a month. But you decide as a group and you see if you had made any progress with what you're aiming for. As I mentioned before, this is the direct URL for the Workwell Toolkit, but a shortcut is just Googling Workwell Toolkit login. And this also is shared in the transport segment of Workwell, and it's something that was put in place in the construction industry. And there are very, very high incidents of mental health and suicide attempts in the transport industry. So IncoLink provided this program, which there were nominated people within a building site that wore blue hats. And they were the people that could talk with people about mental health issues. So for the larger firms in the transport industry, this could be something worth considering, or something done as an industry initiative. And I mentioned previously that Are You OK? I've got a lot of resources. They've got some specifically for the rail industry. TrackSafe played a role nationally and coordinated with the rail providers in Victoria. And so there are specific Are You OK? Resources for the rail area and also for the motor trades side of things. And I, you know, when I was speaking with Ruth Oakton yesterday from Toll, she really said that she felt that it would be great if all the trucking industry and warehouse industry got together to create their own Are You OK? Resources specifically for that industry. So that might be something for people to consider who are watching this. And finally, we're on to the Q&A. So please, anything you've seen come through that you want to know more about or ask more questions, we're going to be having a couple of people. Meryl and Alicia will be joining us very soon. There they are. And Jenny, if you could start reading out if you've got any questions and where we are right now.
Sure. So firstly, an administrative question asking about the slides, if they'll be available later. So yes, we are recording this presentation and that's going to be sent out to everybody who registered probably tomorrow by WorkSafe. Now we've got quite a few questions around the same sort of topics. So firstly, why is it a workplace responsibility to look after contractors and subcontractors when technically they're their own boss? Who wants to tackle that one?
I can speak to that one. There's a legislative obligation, so if we start with a legal obligation first, particularly, I know there's some people from interstate, but in Victoria under the OH&S Act, it's section 21, if anyone's wanting to look that one up, in terms of duties of the employer to the employees. And within that descriptor, it calls out the obligation of the employer to maintain a safe workplace, which is under their control. And within that as well, they call out that the employees deemed to also include contractors and subcontractors. So what you apply to your workers in the worksite that you have control of, you must apply then to your subcontractors as well. And then as well, if you think about best practice, you're bringing contractors in who contribute to your team. So the team approach to all of your staff is always rewarding, and also demonstrates consistency of what's expected of everyone in the role the employee is playing in maintaining the safe worksite, and also the how the employees are performing and using that space as well to report any issues and address any concerns and raise it through the processes.
Great. Something perhaps Meryl wants to touch on, it's along those same veins, but why is it sort of in our best interest to treat them the same way that we do employees? And why is it really important to understand the stresses that can affect our contractors and subcontractors?
Sure. So in terms of why it's in the best interest of your business, well, it's good for your business. We heard about the return on investment of investing in mental health previously. Ensuring you have safe systems of work in place, including an environment that promotes positive mental health, has a positive impact on your workplace culture as well. If you're working collaboratively with your subcontractors and contractors, that can translate to greater productivity, improved engagement, and also being considered an employer of choice. So you're more likely to attract those really great contractors in the future. And as Alicia mentioned before, it's part of your OHS obligations. Your duty as an employer is to provide a safe and healthy working environment for employees, and that also extends to your contractors. In terms of what might be a stressor for contractors and why it's important to understand this, if you start by understanding the potential risks, you'll have a better chance to put appropriate controls in place. This can look like designing the work in order to prevent fatigue in your contractors and subcontractors. It may be having systems and policies in place to manage the workload and the contract pressures that we mentioned before. Also having clear policies and procedures in place to ensure both employees and contractors are treated equally and fairly.
Great.
Okay, this next question is probably a good one for Graham. So it can be harder to build those relationships with contractors and subcontractors. Graham, if people see their contractors who may be struggling, how do they build those relationships to have the crucial talks with them?
Yeah, I've been speaking to a number of people in the transport industry over the last sort of 6 or 8 weeks, and I've heard some wonderful examples. And one employer has a regular, I think it's every quarter, he has the Friday afternoon off where all the employees and subcontractors do something they really enjoy. It could be a game of footy, it could be having an afternoon picnic or whatever. But that's something that he consciously does, which really shows that there is no difference between employees and employers. So that's one example, but I think it is just also being very inclusive. And, when you are seeking to create the right strategies for your business, is to ask your subcontractors as well as your employees, what would some possible solutions be? Just by asking that, having people involved in the decision making increases everyone's likelihood that they will follow the plan and the recommendations rather than just issuing an edict sort of thing. So having an inclusive environment, welcoming some different views, and thinking a bit outside the box, and potentially having some footy games or picnics or whatever to build up the camaraderie for everyone, including employees and contractors.
Okay, and what about perhaps the contractors and subcontractors that you don't necessarily have a lot of face-to-face contact with? What are some tips around really reaching out to them?
I've heard of some very interesting developments in this area, and as I understand it, they're still pretty much under trial, but one of the things I've heard is that they're looking at putting together an app where truck drivers, when they're away from home, they know where other truck drivers are on the road at the same time, and allows them to talk. Also, it allows to who's on the same route, which you can catch up with. And so that can be a very, very good way to build that sort of sense of connection. ideally, you know, every manager in every industry should be asking themselves, you know, do we feel connected as a team? Do we feel safe? And do we have a shared future? But Meryl or Alicia, have you heard of any creative ways to create that connection with, you know, remote truck drivers or train drivers, etc.?
I haven't personally heard of any creative ways, but I think if you are thinking about implementing any kind of procedure or system, having that in a policy or, you know, an official procedure is going to help everybody within your workplace be able to contribute and understand that that's an effective way of staying in touch.
I think
Alicia?
as well, I was just going to say, the thing that came to mind for me now, and I think it's relevant to a lot of workers in the current climate, a lot of us are working remotely, the importance of being connected and creating a sense of community with no matter what your working dynamic and structure is. For those of us who are in an office and then suddenly sent home and often working alone or in isolation, you suddenly sense what it must be like for someone who works 8 hours a day in a truck on their own, that you know, without that connection, it can be really challenging. So any efforts to create those, you know, that the linkage is hugely valuable.
Okay, so another question here around contractors who deliberately hold themselves separate. So they're not necessarily interested in a culture of care, they just want to get their paycheck. How might you deal with those?
Yeah, I remember for AUOK, we did a survey to ask if people felt connected with their workmates, and there was close to a quarter didn't feel connected. And a lot of people said, well, they're people that just want to get on with it, just want to do things. But I also think that sometimes people pull away because they don't feel part of the group, they don't feel part of the community. And don't be afraid to try different ways, different approaches to help facilitate that. At the end of the day, you know, people do like to be part of a community. At the end of the day, they do like to, you know, enjoy the people they're with. And there's just absolutely no doubt that when people are connected, that does happen. So I just wouldn't give up early. I'd try a few other examples.
Okay, let's have a look. We've got a comment here in the chat box. It says the best high-risk project I ever worked on as a contractor was one that had a no-bias policy of contractor and employee management, inclusion and engagement. Every person was treated equally, from toolbox talks, safety meetings, in-house training to the end of the project stage celebrations. So a really good point there.
Yeah, fantastic. And can we just ask our attendees, you know, just to write in the chat box, if you know of examples where that connection has been promoted for, you know, truck drivers or train drivers or bus drivers that are often remote. So if you've seen something really, really effective there, please just type it into the chat box or the Q&A, and Jenny will leave it out.
While we're waiting for that to come through, we've got another question here. So someone has said that they agree with what's being said. However, it can become a challenge when you manage and handle the services your organisation are prepared to make available to the employees, so the EAP services, counselling, etc. Where do you draw a line for subcontractors?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I actually spoke with someone yesterday as part of research which touched on this. And, you know, it tends to be large organisations that do offer the Employee Assistance Program or EAP. But one contractor one employer I spoke to yesterday said that they have all those services for their full-time employers, but they also negotiated in their EAP contract that they would have a whole lot of online resources for their subcontractors. So that was an example where they, you know, were able to extend other benefits to those organisations. And of course, we're here today talking about Workwell, and you know, all the things that are on the Workwell are in the Workwell toolkit are free and are available. And maybe it just is also about creating, you know, an intranet page or whatever on within your IT system that subcontractors can access as well. Alicia or Meryl, any comments around that as well?
I think You've said that brilliantly, Graham. Yeah, it's just about thinking about different ways if it's not within your policies to have those types of services available to contractors, maybe thinking about different ways that you can include them in providing those resources to them.
Okay, no more questions or comments? Looks like we've covered everybody's inquiries.
Excellent, that's great. So thank you very much for everyone being here today. To Meryl and Alicia and Jenny, thanks for helping on this webinar. It is a bit of a first doing a series of webinars specifically targeted at an industry, and so I hope you've had some value from this. But more importantly, I hope you really consider how you can access the Workwell toolkit and decide what you're going to focus on, and then work your way through those 5 steps that we've talked about before. So from my perspective, my wish for you all is to, be caring, be helpful, and go for the growth zone. Thanks very much.